The following program contains adult content and sexual themes. Viewer discretion is advised. And it contains murder. Lots and lots of murder.
You stinking bastard.
People tell me, hey, you're gonna go die and go to hell. At least I'm not alone.
For 911, where's your emergency?
Oh, this is Sandy. For 31 Rock, Black Plymouth Road.
What's the
Send the
problem?
police. Send the police.
And he goes, don't be a hero, mate. And I said, I'm not trying to be a hero, but the police are coming.
One in the chest, one in the head. Fired by Detective Sergeant Roger Rogerson.
I was branching out. That's when the cannibalism started, eating of the heart and the arm muscle.
I would have nailed Carl Williams' hands to a coffee table and just pulled it out of his backside. Carl Williams is a wobbly-bottomed little cherub-faced little boy whose life would be.
I'd harm someone each time I'd kill someone. There'd be an enormous amount, especially at first, enormous amount of horror, guilt, remorse afterwards. But then that impulse to do it again would come back even stronger.
Welcome to another episode of Bloody Murder.
Howdy, I'm Barney Black.
And I'm Tara Saraban. We're a weekly true crime podcast focusing on some of the lesser known crime stories from Australia.
And indeed around the world.
Indeed. What will you be covering this week, Barney?
Well, I'm going to talk about an assassination of a major Australian public figure that happened in 1991.
Oh, who is it?
Well, you'll find out.
Oh, secrets.
How about you, Tara?
I'm going to be talking about the investigation into a young woman whose body was found on the roadside in Pennsylvania, and what it took for the police and FBI to identify her and eventually track down her killer.
Ooh, I like a good procedural story.
Yeah, it's
That sounds
very,
good.
very procedural.
Great. Before we begin, what's been shaking in Taraland?
Oh, I discovered a new true crime TV show, which is
Ooh,
pretty
awesome.
exciting for a total crime nerd like me. It's called Evil Lives Here.
American?
It is American, but I noticed there's an episode on Peter Tobin, who's Scottish, so it mustn't all be American. I've only seen one episode of it, and it's a little bit sensationalized, as these things tend to be, but it actually has interviews with like partners or children or family members of murderers and serial killers. And it's structured a bit like I Survived, in that they sort of tell the whole story but from their perspective.
Okay.
And it's really fascinating, but I'm also not 100% sure that what they're saying is entirely true. But I did watch an episode that's told from the perspective of the wife of the murderer in the case that I'm actually talking about, the murderer. And so I'll mention what came up from her, but I'm just not 100% sure it's true. But it is very interesting to see that side of things.
Absolutely. You know, I worry about crime documentaries sometimes because, and especially some of the bigger ones that have come out recently, especially Making the Murderer and West of Memphis, because
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes the filmmakers have an agenda and I don't think they're presenting a full and frank story of what's going on. And yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, in a way, they do definitely have to have an idea of the narrative that they're planning.
That's
when
right.
they're starting. A lot of them, anyway. It doesn't all go that way. But yeah, because you were saying that there's actually some evidence that West Memphis 3 are guilty, which I haven't seen yet.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to go into
No,
that
that
because
would be too long.
it's a long-winded explanation.
And you don't want to get Damien Eccles mad at you.
No, I
because
do not.
He's a very popular dude.
He really is.
Yeah.
And look, to tell you the truth, I don't have an opinion either way on those.
Mm-hmm.
I love watching those documentaries.
Oh, I tend to just go along with them and be like, yeah, that's crap. They were totally set up.
Yeah, I don't know though, you know, because that's...
Well, we don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
So what have you been up to this week anyway? Anything interesting?
Reading and researching mostly.
Yeah, what, just underwear catalogues or?
Mostly crime.
Oh, crime.
Mostly crime.
Okay, that makes sense.
I came across this doozy. This happened in Ohio in 2012. A teenage girl, Shakira Dorsey.
Oh, her hips don't lie.
No, probably not. She was sitting with a group of other girls when one of them passed wind. As teenagers will do, Dorsey began telling a friend off for her ill-timed fart. The girl didn't take the teasing well, and things quickly escalated to fisticuffs.
Whoa.
The unnamed farter got so violent with Shakira Dorsey that she ended up beating her to death, which is not
being
funny.
called out for a
Yeah.
fart. That's taking it a little too far.
Several adults watched the fight and didn't intervene until it was too late.
Why on earth would they let that happen?
Well, they were obviously having bets on them. My money's on the farter.
My money would be on the farter too, but we know that she won the fight, so that's biased.
Hey, didn't your brother tell you that you're the only girl that farts?
Yeah. As part of his program of sadistic indoctrination of me when I was a young child, he did in fact
siblings.
tell me that I was the only girl that farted and no other girls farted, and that was yet another reason why it was gross.
Yeah, siblings have a thing about farts when they're little, don't they? I used to fart into a jar and put the lid on and then give it to my brother and say, open this, it smells weird. And he would always do it.
What, he did it more than once?
More than once. I'd have to leave a few months between so he'd forget.
Why on earth would he? Oh, so he just forgot. He didn't think to himself, jars from Barney just don't open those.
No.
Wow, okay. Well, I'm never going to open a jar you hand me unless I know for sure it's full to the brim with vodka.
All right, we promise not to talk about farts anymore this episode.
Ah, do we? That sounds like a good idea, actually.
It really does.
Although, I like to think that Randy Quaid listens, and I also like to think that he enjoys our potty humour.
Well, I know Snooky does.
She definitely enjoys fart jokes. Should I just launch into my
Yeah, tell us
crime?
about this murder in, was it Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it's in Pennsylvania. Well, that's where... you'll see.
Okay.
You'll see.
All right.
So early on a spring morning on March 24th, 1993, a young woman's body was dumped on a snowbank beside a highway in the small town of Bellefonte, Pennsylvania.
Bellefonte.
Which had a population of 7,000 at the time. Yeah, it's a cool name, huh?
Yeah.
She had long blonde hair and was wearing only underwear and a sweater and had no form of ID. She looked to be in her late teens or early 20s. The police had to first figure out who she was before being able to track down who the hell had killed her. On his way to work, a man had spotted her body on the side of the road. He called 911 and the Pennsylvania State Police cordoned off the scene where her body lay near the junction of two main interstate highways. The coroner deduced that the young woman was already dead before her body had been dumped.
Lividity, probably. That's where the blood settles in a certain way in your body and leaves discoloration on the skin, and if the body's moved and it doesn't match their position, you know that the body's been moved.
Lividity, not just a good name for a girl.
No.
Her hands were tied and she had a length of rope knotted around her neck. DA Ray Grecar was struck by the callousness of how someone had just dumped her body like garbage when they were done with her. This was the first homicide in Bellefonte in 13 years, and it really affected the inhabitants of the quiet town. It also made them concerned that they had a killer in their midst.
Well, that's the worst place to have a killer, in your midst.
I would rather have a gorilla in my midst.
I don't think that's the name of that film.
I'm pretty sure that it actually is. Law enforcement was stressed that they might never be able to figure out who the young woman was, let alone find who had killed her. Due to the 6-inch indentation in the snow. Wow. Next time I write a sentence, it's not going to be that one. So the indentation in the snow where her body lay, it seemed that she'd been thrown from a truck with a cab that was high off the ground. Dual-wheeled tyre tracks left at the scene also pointed detectives in this direction.
Okay, so the snow was quite deep where she'd been thrown. It obviously hadn't snowed for a while, so it left a big hole. So she was thrown from a bit of a height.
She was a slight young woman.
And
so for her to have gone in 6 inches means that they must have kind of thrown her from a height.
Okay,
yes.
and what vehicles have dual wheels? Probably trucks or...
Yeah, exactly, like big semis.
Yeah, not a lorry.
No, it wasn't a unicycle. Anyway, plaster casts of the tracks were made by crime scene technicians and sent to the Pennsylvania State Police Lab so that they could hopefully identify the brand of tyres.
They probably have a database for that too.
Oh, absolutely they do. And any individual features that may help link them to the killer's vehicle. So a search of the surrounding area didn't reveal any other evidence. At her autopsy, the cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The core temperature of her body showed that she'd been dead for under 12 hours when she was found. Other tests revealed that she'd been engaged in sexual activity before her death, and due to the circumstances, they figured it was probably rape.
Probably had to do the core temperature thing because if it's in the snow, there's not going to be bugs around, so that's what they use a lot.
Look at
time
you!
Of death, don't
You
they?
got your little
Entomologists,
detective hat on
forensic
right now.
entomologists to do time of death, yeah.
Yeah, indeed.
Which is more accurate than core temperature.
Bug people. They didn't get the bug people in.
No, they wouldn't.
Because although it was spring, it was still snowy. It was early spring.
Right.
So when they removed the knot from around her neck, they discovered a single dark hair, which obviously didn't come from the body of the blonde girl.
Was it a bear? It was a human hair.
It was a human hair, I believe.
Not an alpaca?
No, it wasn't an alpaca hair. No, it wasn't. But very, very intellectual question there. Thank you for your contribution.
Oh, you're welcome, Tara.
The hair and ropes used to bind her were sent to the FBI's Washington office to be analysed. They hope the types of knots used might reveal something about the killer as well.
Could be a sailor.
Yep, could be a clown that made balloon animals. The young woman had some numbers written on the palm of her left hand, but they too were very smudged and worn off and were pretty much illegible. So hoping that the FBI lab might be able to decipher what was written, the skin on her left hand was removed and sent to them.
Right.
Yeah, her fingerprints were run through APHIS, but they weren't on file.
That's a fingerprinty database thing?
Yeah, automated fingerprint identification system.
Cool. Neat.
Yeah. Checks on missing persons databases also didn't show anyone who matched the girl's physical description. Dental x-rays were taken so they could be used to help identify her once they had some leads. Now, if the young woman were ever going to be identified, they'd need to take some photos of her looking as much like she would have when she was alive as possible.
Yeah.
So they'd be able to show them around to people.
Reconstructions, Photoshop stuff.
Well, no, they needed to actually try and make her dead body look more alive so they could photograph it. This is the early 90s. I'm not sure how great Photoshop was back then. But it was complicated by the cuts made to her face and body during her ordeal and also the autopsy.
Yeah.
So a mortician named Stephen Mondock spent several hours working on her so these photos could be taken. These were then put in newspapers in the hope that somebody would recognise her.
And did they?
Should I just jump to the end? Or
I'm sorry. Keep going.
What, do you just want all the answers? Some crib notes? Maybe a pamphlet? When the young woman's body was brought to Mondock, the coroner had referred to her as Jane Doe. But Mondock, the mortician, really wasn't down with calling people that, as he thought it was far too impersonal. So he came up with another name for her. LaSquisha.
No.
That was it.
No.
Since they found her in the spring, and it was early morning when she was discovered, he decided to name her Spring Dawn.
Oh.
I think that's incredibly sweet.
It is.
But I also think Dawn Spring sounds more like an actual name. But
it does.
You know, he was very nice. I've seen an interview with him.
Right.
Anyway, investigators took the photo to local truck stops and gas stations and asked everyone there if they'd ever seen the girl, and flyers were also circulated. The police received a lot of calls, but none of the leads panned out. In late April, the FBI contacted the detectives in Pennsylvania and told them that the number on the girl's hand was actually a phone number with a Florida area code. When they tried the number, they found it was disconnected.
Hello? You a murderer?
It was disconnected, so no one answered. They were going to just say, hello, are you a murderer? But no one answered.
Wow, that's some fine police work.
Also, why would she write the murderer's phone number on her hand? It's probably unlikely.
Maybe she didn't know their name, but neither... No, I don't know.
That just doesn't sound right. So anyway, they started thinking that maybe the area code on her hand wasn't written down correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, so they thought that she wouldn't have come from somewhere warm like Florida, as her skin was very pale. And their intuition just told them that that wasn't the right direction to go in. They theorised that the girl came from more of a winter area, north or west of Pennsylvania, and probably within a 12-hour drive of where her body was found. They recorded all the cities within a 12-hour radius that had the same exchange as the numbers on her palm, and sent her description, photos, and the phone numbers to all the police in those areas to look into in the hope that they could come up with some leads. Because they got no leads. The residents of Bellefonte had developed a lot of empathy for the young girl whose body had been so callously used and discarded, and offered to help in any way. Touched by her story, the town kind of adopted her in a sense.
Oh, it's nice to have someone in your court when you're so
dead and
abandoned and treated
and
so badly.
Nameless. Yeah. The lead detectives in the case both had teenage daughters as well, which made them feel quite a personal involvement with the case. And they spent all their time at work and when not working, obsessing over it and talking to each other about it. It's like everyone in this town was just all about this. The support in the community was so strong for the unknown girl that local florists, hairdressers, and other businesses wanted to donate their services for her upcoming funeral. People offered to donate clothing, ministers volunteered their services, and so did the casket company and the cemetery. A monument company was even willing to donate a headstone. Those things ain't cheap.
Yeah. So I guess it said Spring Dawn on it.
Yeah, I guess it would at that point. So as the body couldn't be preserved much longer, plans were made for her burial. Shortly before the burial was about to go ahead, a break in the case emerged.
Ooh.
One of the sheriff's officers in Maine, who had been sent the photos and phone numbers, had tried calling them and reached a local school guidance counsellor named Mark Rosenberg. When they went to visit him and his wife, they recognised the photo of the girl immediately, and a big, spooky, sweet coincidence occurred. It turned out her real name was actually Dawn.
Wow.
Yeah, her name was Dawn Marie Birnbaum, and she was a 17-year-old runaway. So mortician Steve Mondock had been like eerily close to her real name when he gave her that name because he didn't want to call her Jane Doe.
And her friends called her Springy.
Springy. Did they?
No, I don't know.
Why would... Oh, Barney. Oh, Barney. So anyway, Mondock was really shocked when he found out that he was so close to her real name. But he said that it just felt right. So,
cool.
You know,
That's
intuition.
Neat. Oh.
So Mark Rosenberg had been one of the last people to speak to Dawn before she died. He said she'd contacted him from a payphone a few days before her murder. The boarding school he worked at, which Dawn had gone to, was for at-risk teens. Dawn had been having problems with authority ever since her parents had gotten divorced. She'd also lived in over a dozen foster homes in Indiana, which is where her mother lived, and she'd run away from almost all of them because, unfortunately, a lot of bad things can happen in foster homes.
Well, yeah, a lot of foster homes are fantastic, and
Absolutely.
people who volunteer their time are great. But
It's a brilliant concept, but sometimes people get taken advantage of in that situation.
When you hear about like terrible criminals, usually they've had bad foster home experiences. That's pretty common.
Normally when you hear about people who have had any foster home experiences, they have had bad ones.
Yeah.
Even though there are obviously some great ones out there. Hopefully one day we'll think of foster homes and we'll actually think of positive things. That would be good.
Yeah, it would.
So anyway, during Rosenberg's final conversation with Dawn, the operator kept interrupting them, saying that she had to put more money in. So he asked Dawn to call him again later so he'd know that she was safe, and he gave her his home phone number, which is what she wrote down on her left hand.
Oh, wow.
She said she'd call him back, but she never did. The boarding school sent her dental records to the police in Pennsylvania to compare to the x-rays they'd taken, and they matched.
So it's definitely Dawn.
It's Dawn Marie Birnbaum. The FBI became involved as Dawn was not an adult and she'd been held against her will before being murdered and also crossed state lines.
Oh, yeah.
Police officers in Maine interviewed Dawn's friends. Her friend Heidi Hansen told them that Dawn was planning to hitch a lift from a truck driver, which is something she'd done the year before with her friend Mandy Gray when they'd bummed a ride with a trucker named John Hoffpower. After dropping Mandy off in Georgia, Dawn and John had continued driving, and they had a mutual attraction sort of thing, which developed into an actual relationship. He was in his 20s. It became so serious that he even took her home to meet his grandmother who had raised him. Dawn stayed with him and would keep him company on his truck driving routes. He treated her well, and she was apparently really happy during their time together.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but several weeks into their journey, John's truck was pulled over by police at a random traffic stop. After checking Dawn's license, the officer found out that she was a missing teenager and insisted that she accompany him so he could ensure she was sent back to school. Dawn pleaded with the officer to let her stay with John, but he told her that wasn't possible. So John held a torch for Dawn, and he had since tried to visit her at the school, but security wouldn't let him in. She'd run away again to try and track down John and hope to rekindle her relationship with him.
Oh,
because I think that was one of the happiest times of her life.
Yeah, right.
That year before when she was on the road with him. So on Sunday, March 21st, 3 days before her body was discovered, Dawn had gone to a movie with some friends and snuck out to go on the road looking for John.
What movie was it?
It's the early 90s. That's like what I did last time. So
Lethal Weapon 1.
I'm thinking, don't tell Mum the babysitter's dead.
That's what you did last time.
I know. What about Clueless? If I was
Sure.
her, I'd be wanting that. Yeah?
Yeah.
You happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
But she didn't see it though, so that's a bummer for her because she snuck out. So her plan was to hitch to the Dysart truck stop in Bangor, Maine, hoping to catch up with him there. This information had led the FBI to think that John Hoffpower was now their number one suspect.
It does seem like that, doesn't it?
It does indeed. So the FBI began the process of tracking him down and found out that he lived in Mississippi. Unable to find him there, they went to see his closest relative, which was his grandmother who lived in Emory, which is also in Mississippi. His grandmother told investigators that she and John were very close, and he called her almost daily, no matter where he was. As he had introduced her to Dawn, she was gutted to hear about what had happened to her. She then told them her own devastating news about John. She'd last heard from him in September of the previous year, which was several months before Dawn had gone looking for him. It was very out of character for John not to be in contact with his grandmother for long periods of time. And also he'd stopped doing his job and looking after his pets.
Ooh.
He'd even left his wallet in his house when he disappeared. People don't do that.
People don't do that.
His grandmother had come to the terrible conclusion that John was dead, even though his body had not been found. They had found his car in September 1992 near his home in Mississippi, and it was like totally shot through with bullet holes. And it's thought that he'd gotten involved with some scumbags who ended up killing him.
Oh, we don't know why?
We don't know
Drugs,
why.
something like that?
We don't know for sure that it happened, but he is presumed dead.
Yeah, wow.
Crazy, huh? So Dawn never even knew that John was missing, or presumed
So this
dead
all
when she
happened
set out.
before Dawn was found.
Yeah, good 6-7 months before she was found. So this meant that obviously he wasn't driving his regular route and frequenting the truck stop where Dawn hoped to meet up with him, which is what actually would have caused her to accept a lift from the man who ended up killing her. So in a way, his death created her death. But if she'd stayed with John from the very beginning,
Maybe she would have been in that car.
and she might have got killed
With him.
anyway when he met with foul play.
Yeah, there's a lot of ifs there.
There are a lot of ifs there, but it's very kind of like, what if the sliding doors both resulted in her death? Like, that would just be, I don't know, it makes me think it's kind of poetic and crazy.
Well, if you believe in all that fate shit, which I don't.
Really? It sounded to me like you
I
were
think you
well
create your
into
own
it.
fate, but yeah.
To a degree, but then there's things, I don't know. I don't presume to be arrogant enough to know what's right and what's not and what's real and what's not.
Well, I am.
Yeah, I know you are. You're an arrogant fuck. Okay, anyway. With their prime suspect now presumed dead, the FBI had to go back to the drawing board. They now had no suspects in the case at all. Investigators visited the Dysart's truck stop to see if anybody there remembered seeing Dawn. The cashier said that she had seen her talking on the payphone shortly before she was killed. Even though it had been 2 months since her murder, several people remembered seeing Dawn at the truck stop, asking truckers for rides as they passed through the door. The payphone she had used to call her school guidance counsellor was only 15 feet from the counter where the customers paid for their fuel. The investigators obtained a grand jury subpoena for the truck stop telephone records. They thought the people that Dawn had phoned that fateful day might know who she was with and where she was planning on going. The records confirmed Dawn's call to her school counsellor, Mark Rosenberg, in Maine, and they also showed the last call she had made was to her friend Mandy Gray, who's the one that had travelled with her last time she was hitching around.
Yeah.
State troopers visited Mandy at her home in Georgia. Dawn had told Mandy in the phone call that she'd hitched a lift to Dysart's with a friendly truck driver who had given her money for food when he dropped her at the truck stop. So a nice one. She also said that Dawn was really disappointed that she hadn't seen John there. She wasn't sure what to do next, as she was still hell-bent on finding John. But she was worried that if she went towards Indiana, where her mother lived, she might be picked up by authorities that were looking for her there.
Sent back to the boarding school.
Yeah. She'd had enough of that stuff. She wanted to go back on the road. So as it seemed likely to investigators that Dawn had hitched another ride with a truck driver, they subpoenaed all the receipts from the truck stop for a 4-day period around when Dawn disappeared, thinking that whoever picked her up had probably bought gas or something from there.
Petrol.
Petrol. Yeah, or gas. Might have been gas.
Sure.
They also obtained receipts for the truck stops nearest to where Dawn's body had been dumped in Pennsylvania. They were hoping that whoever had picked Dawn up had made purchases in both places using a credit card.
Okay, so they're a very long way apart, and the coincidence of them both buying gas at those same places.
Yeah, would be pretty damn slim.
Yeah, it's putting them at the scene, yeah.
Yeah, however, though, it was 650 miles from the truck stop to where Dawn's body was found, but big rigs can travel up to 1,500 miles on a full tank. So the likelihood of them having to fill up in Pennsylvania was really low. It was a long shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So over the next 4 weeks, investigators scanned thousands of receipts, hoping to find someone who had bought gas or something from Dysart's truck stop and a local truck stop in Pennsylvania. Out of the several thousand names on the receipts, there was only one match. The name was James Robert Cruz Jr. He'd bought gas from Dysart's on the morning of March 22nd. At the time, the phone records show that Dawn had been using the payphone just 15 feet away. He'd bought gas again in Pennsylvania a few hours before Dawn's body was discovered. This was the break investigators had been looking for. The receipts also revealed that James Robert Cruz worked for a trucking company based in Ohio. Investigators called his manager, who verified the credit card purchases. Cruz was driving truck 44 on a route that fit into the map of the crime, so they now had a suspect. His manager told the FBI that Cruz was a model employee at the trucking company. But when investigators checked his criminal history, they found he had a record, and he'd been in the US military and had served time in Fort Leavenworth for attempting to murder someone by strangling them.
That sounds like a pretty damn good suspect.
Yeah, he is sounding like a good suspect at this point. So his record also showed that his blood type was A positive, which was consistent with the seminal fluid they found in Dawn. So the next step was to see if the tyres on the truck he'd been driving matched the tyre trucks that they'd made casts of at the scene where Dawn's body had been dumped. An Ohio FBI agent inspected the tyres on truck 44 while Cruz was working in another rig. They were an unusual brand and they matched.
Wow.
This was another much-needed breakthrough in the case. This now gave investigators enough evidence to obtain a search warrant for the truck and take blood and hair samples from Cruz for DNA analysis. While Cruz was away driving another rig, recovery technicians from the FBI examined the truck. The problem was that if Dawn had been in the truck, it would have been 2 months ago, and it had been cleaned many times since then, so it was unlikely that there'd still be any evidence inside. After spending a day doing an exhaustive search of the truck and trailer, the technicians were about to give up when one of them noticed something. At the bottom of the passenger side door, there was some carpeting that had a single long blonde hair stuck to the fibres of the carpet. It was an incredibly unlikely find, and the hair was rushed to the FBI lab for analysis. Investigators thought it was probably too good to be true that this would turn out to be a hair that belonged to Dawn. So they crossed their fingers, but they couldn't party on about it. When Cruz returned from his run, investigators spoke to him under the guise of looking for a runaway teen last seen at the truck stop. They made it seem as though they were talking to a lot of truck drivers about this matter.
Sure.
They asked to see Cruz's logbook for the days surrounding Dawn's death. To ensure truck drivers don't drive too many hours in a day, the logs are government mandated. Cruz said that he had falsified some information on the logs to remain in legal limits. It's pretty common for people to do that.
I'm going to drive all night, going to take some speed.
And then maybe I'll just go to Hooters for the next day. So they observed that coincidentally, the parts of the logs that had been altered were for the times when he'd bought fuel from Dysart's and in Pennsylvania.
Oh, fishy.
Very fishy. When asked if he had fueled up between those two locations, Cruz said that he hadn't, as he could drive further than that on a full tank. When confronted with the receipts, they showed him the receipts of his fuel purchases, he paused and said that, yes, he did actually remember doing that. And he'd done so because they gave away free showers at the truck stop in Pennsylvania.
Free showers.
Yeah, he was just feeling a bit dirty. So they showed him a picture of Dawn, and he said that he'd never seen her before in his life. They then revealed that they had strong evidence that linked him to the crime and outlined it for him. Cruz calmly responded that it was all a coincidence. In fact, Cruz's demeanour during the interview was so calm and cooperative that the detectives started thinking it might have indeed all been a coincidence after all, and maybe he wasn't their man. He didn't even seem bothered when the detective produced a warrant for hair and blood samples. The detectives later learned from FBI profilers that such a super cool demeanour can actually be an indicator of guilt in some cases.
Or it could mean he didn't do it.
It could, but no, there's a lot of evidence if you ask me.
Yeah,
also,
well,
I know
it is
the
mounting
story,
up. It is mounting up.
So on September 6th, the results of the blood and hair analysis showed that they matched the hair and DNA left on Dawn's body, and they proved that Cruz was in fact their killer. Yes. On September 8th, Cruz was arrested. This time his demeanour was anything but calm and collected, and said he was sulky and full of rage at the investigators who arrested him. He was charged with first, second and third degree murder. So he collected the whole set.
The whole set, nice.
Yeah, all of it. Also rape, kidnapping and attempting to avoid prosecution. At Cruz's trial, the prosecution team reconstructed the events that had led to Dawn's murder. At Dyson's truck stop, Dawn had met Cruz and he'd agreed to give her a ride, and then they headed south. As Dawn had hitched rides with truckers in the past and nothing bad had happened to her, she was not suspicious of Cruz and had no reason to believe he was a predator who had plans to do her harm. In the truck, Cruz stayed up, falsifying his logbook, while Dawn settled down to sleep for the night. Late on the night of March 23rd, he bound Dawn, raped her and strangled her in the sleeping compartment of his truck. He then disconnected the trailer from the cab and drove through the backwoods of Pennsylvania looking for a place to dump her body. In the early hours on March 24th, he pushed Dawn's body from his truck onto the side of the road. The DA really wanted to ram home to the jury just how long it took for Cruz to murder Dawn. The pathologist testified that it took 4 long minutes of strangulation for her to die. During his closing arguments, the DA tied a rope tightly around a dummy's neck and then set a timer for 4 minutes and let it count down in the silent courtroom to really drive it home.
Yeah, how dramatic.
Yeah, after the 4 minutes ran down, he turned to the jury and said, "That's a long time to change your mind."
It really is.
I know. How awesome a way to demonstrate just like how long this actually takes. Because in movies, it's like, it's a few seconds.
Oh, that's completely cold-blooded.
Severely. 4 minutes. That's an eternity. So yeah, wow. After 14 hours of deliberation, the jury found James Robert Cruz Jr. guilty of first-degree murder, and the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hooray!
Hooray. They got him. That's some fine police work there.
Isn't it awesome? But wait, there is more.
There is more?
There is more. At the time of his arrest, there had been a serial killer operating in Cruz's home state of Ohio. Over the 2 years prior, the killer had murdered several sex workers and dumped their bodies along highways and off-ramps. These women had been tied up and strangled the same way that Dawn had.
Oh.
A task force was put together to investigate Cruz's links to these murders, but they were not able to find enough evidence to actually prove them. The investigators were all quite sure that Cruz was their man, though, and after he was locked up, these serial murders in Ohio suddenly stopped. So, whoa. Whoa. That's just a crazy thing. So, okay, Evil Lives Here, that new show that I was talking about.
Yeah.
So I watched an episode about it where they were talking to Cruz's wife. Now, she'd had 3 kids from a previous marriage, and then she married Cruz and they had another 3 kids.
They completely Brady Bunched it.
They did Brady Bunch it, except he didn't have his other 3. So they had 3 together and she had 3 separate.
They kind of Brady Bunched it.
They half Brady Bunched it. But she was saying at first it was all great and everything, but then he started to get increasingly more violent and controlling. He also had an issue with her older kids, who were all daughters from her first marriage, particularly her oldest daughter, who was a 16-year-old at the time this all went down.
Who doesn't hate their stepkids? I'm just kidding.
Oh my God. I was not expecting that. So anyway, he used to bring home trinkets and women's clothing for these daughters of his wives.
But not new stuff with tags and stuff.
No, nothing was in a box or a bag or anything. That he'd just hand them to them, which is fishy. And he also gave her oldest daughter a cassette player that had a cassette in it. And according to this show, it had a recording of Dawn doing a cassette diary about herself. But I'm just thinking, if this had existed, wouldn't the police have found it?
Yeah, and it sounds like the police were right on their game too
Well,
with
they
this
had a whole
investigation.
task force to make sure, to see if he was a serial killer. Also on this show, the woman said that in the shed there was like all this stuff and all this jewelry and all these like things and books about murder. Nothing wrong with that. And so, like, things that she said tied him to these other murders, and she was convinced that he'd done it. But I just feel like, why would the police have not looked in his shed if there really was a treasure trove of evidence and jewelry and things? Like, that's what makes
they did search his home, didn't they?
Well, they'd have to have searched his home.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's what makes me feel like I don't know how true this show is.
Unsubstantiated.
Unsubstantiated, but also really fascinating, because I definitely believe some of the things she said about what it was like to live with him, and I really enjoyed getting this completely different perspective.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna watch some more Evil Lives Here and see how that goes. But yeah.
I'll just take it with a grain of salt, I guess. It's like I was saying earlier. I think some filmmakers have a narrative that they want to push.
Absolutely.
With some of these
Impose the
documentaries.
narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was also a really cool FBI Files episode about this that I looked at too, that gave me some of the good information there.
Great.
Yeah. So that's a bit of a departure. I normally talk about horrible serial killers from a different perspective, but thought the investigation work in that was just really phenomenal.
That was great.
What do you got?
Well, I've got this assassination that happened to a major Australian public figure in 1991. Okay, it's July 4th, 1991. Dr.Victor Chang,
Oh, he was amazing.
a world-leading heart surgeon, was gunned down in a Sydney street. Now, initially the motive was unknown. The shooting, some said, was payback because there was a refusal to conduct a heart transplant operation to a triad boss. No, claimed others. The 54-year-old doctor was assassinated by Chinese government agents because he was an outspoken supporter of the pro-democracy movement.
What is it? Espionage and intrigue.
Yeah, there were some other unfounded reports that it was a blackmail scheme gone wrong, and he was,
Blackmailed?
he was cheating on his wife or some stuff like that.
None
of that.
Everyone who cheats on their wife gets shot.
Yeah, but he wasn't. He was lovely. And there's also that he was a victim of a Chinese illegal organ traders after he refused to supply them with black market organs.
So they're really focusing on the whole Chinese angle when they're trying to figure out what happened to him, aren't they?
That's right. Well, Occam's razor is often the case when evil is committed, and this is no exception, as the explanation is far simpler and banal.
Right.
So let's hear about Dr. Victor Chang, because he's a great guy.
Yeah, very intelligent man.
Yeah, Victor Peter Chang was born in Shanghai, China in 1936 to Australian-born Chinese parents. At the age of 12, Victor lost his mother to cancer. It is said that Victor decided to become a doctor.
Oh, okay.
In 1953, at the age of 15, Victor Chang came to Australia to complete his secondary schooling at the Christian Brothers College in Lewisham. That's in Sydney. Later, Victor graduated from Sydney University with a Bachelor of Medicine and a Bachelor of Surgery.
Wow.
And in the following years, Dr. Chang obtained a fellowship in surgery from the American and the English College of Surgeons. So he's quite the bright scientist.
Yeah, he's very learned.
He returned to Australia in 1972 to join the elite St. Vincent's cardio team.
Oh, a cardio team. That sounds like they wear spandex and do aerobics.
No, it's the opposite of that.
Oh, they wear hessian and sit still.
That included Dr. Harry Windsor. In 1968, Australia's first heart transplant was performed by Dr. Windsor.
Oh, okay. And that was in 68.
That was in 68, yeah.
Okay.
Victor knew that operating on people was not enough. He knew that a heart transplant meant that someone had to die first. It was a shortage of organ donors that led him to the much-needed research in various cardiothoracic devices and procedures. And as a result, he set about designing and developing an artificial heart valve and an artificial heart.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
no pig's hearts for us in this country anymore.
No, absolutely. After an anti-rejection drug became available in 1980...
I need to start giving that to hot guys. Anti-rejection drug. I'm going to dose them up.
Yeah, I think you roofie them. Which made heart transplants more feasible. Which made Tara as a girlfriend more feasible.
Maybe maybe I got to take it for myself so that I don't reject myself.
He lobbied politicians and businessmen to raise enough funds to finance the National Heart Transplant Program in 1983. He performed 187 heart transplants, including 14 heart-lung operations in just 7 years, with a patient survival rate of 85%.
Okay, that's crazy brilliant.
Yeah, I know.
This guy.
Okay, on February 23, 1984, Dr. Chang successfully transplanted a heart into a 39-year-old Armadale shearer.
He sheared armadillos. An armadillo shearer.
There's a suburb called Armadale. It's not.
And that's where he had his armadillo farm.
Sure. A few weeks later, on April 8th, this special moment in Australian medical history was repeated as a 14-year-old girl named Fiona Cute.
I remember her.
From Tamworth, New South Wales, became Australia's second heart transplant.
She was the second owner of the heart plant.
Yes.
It's got these really pretty leaves.
Yeah.
Heart transplant. Okay, so she got the... Hang on, so he did the Armadale shearer and Fiona.
Yes.
And that's with the new technology.
Yes.
Yeah.
Victor's operations became worldwide news. This has now grown to be the most successful heart transplant and lung transplant program in the world.
Wow.
Sadly, the Armadale shearer...
The armadillo shearer?
Yeah. He unfortunately he died a few months after his operation.
Oh.
However, after a second transplant, because the first one didn't take, Fiona Cute's new heart did really well, and she's still alive. That's over 30 years ago.
Wow.
Because of Victor and his team at St. Vincent's Hospital. Yeah, much of Fiona Cute's life has been spent in the public eye, and she has used her high profile in public service, working for numerous charitable organisations, including the Victor Chang Foundation and the Starlight Foundation. In 1999, Fiona Cute was appointed a member of the Order of Australia in recognition of her public awareness promotion of heart disease and for her work raising funds for seriously and terminally ill children. As a result of her fame, Cute was approached to appear on the Australian soap Neighbours.
Oh, no.
But she said no.
Hey, classy lady.
Yeah, I've seen interviews with her, and she's amazing.
Yeah, she's actually really cool.
And one of the interviewers asked her, after receiving this, she was only 14.
Yeah.
She was terrified.
Yeah, and it was
and her
big
parents
news
were terrified. They after she was well, did she want to go on in life to do, to live a very good life because of it?
And she was like, no, I want to smoke 5 packs a day and discover heroin.
No,
That's
said
not
the
what
opposite.
She said? Okay, no.
No, she said she did. She felt like she owed the world and she wanted to do this.
Well, she has done a lot of good.
She's an amazing person. So anyway, back to Victor Chang. While he was driving to work on a winter's morning in July 1991, he would meet 2 Malaysian men, Chu Lian and Philip Lim. Let's hear about them.
Okay.
Chu Lian is a 48-year-old Malaysian national whose criminal career had been...
Is he 48 now or was he 48
He was 48 then.
All right.
He was 48-year-old Malaysian national whose criminal career had been, considerably less successful.
Right, so he's a bit of a dumbass prick.
Yeah. He was the eldest of 4 children. Luan, at the age of 5, was taken in by his aunt when his father died and his mother abandoned him and his siblings.
Oh, well, that's a tough one.
So he decided to quit school at 8. He'd had enough of those books.
That is the opposite of Victor Chang, isn't it?
It really is. In 1965, the year he had a son to his live-in lover, he committed an armed robbery in Kuala Lumpur and was quickly caught.
What a bumper year.
And was sentenced to 9 years in Pudi prison. Pudi prison? Pudai prison.
Pudding prison?
Pudding prison.
It's made of pudding and they give you pudding to eat. It sounds okay.
Yeah, and we need better pop guards.
Again?
When released, he married a woman named Chong Soon Yep, and they had 3 children in rapid succession.
Right, okay. It's funny how sort of people with maybe a bit of a criminal bent often have a hell of a lot of kids, don't they?
They do, don't they?
Yeah, they just want to keep those genes spreading, huh?
Chu Luan, when he was in prison, he was assessed by prison psychologists to be of low to average intelligence, emotionally unstable, and he liked to get his violence on.
Yeah. So have as many kids as you want, champ. Get them out there.
Yeah. He worked on and off in construction sites, but believed mistakenly that his real talent was for crime.
That's why he'd been in jail for 9 years, right?
Yeah. In May 1968, he and his buddies mugged a man in Kuala Lumpur. Chu Luan had pulled a handgun and relieved his victim of his $150 watch.
He's a watch thief.
Yeah, quickly identified police. He was on the lam.
What?
So the police knew who he was.
Oh, they quickly identified him, okay.
So he was on the lam until the following year when police snapped him up. This time he was sentenced to 12 years in Putty prison.
Oh my God. Wow. Well, he's obviously a criminal mastermind.
And dealt 8 strokes of the rattan for good measure.
Is that when they freeze a rat and use it as a stick to hit you?
Well, no, it's just a stick, I think. It's like lashes. You know.
Okay. Well, lashes sounds far worse than being hit with a stick, if you ask me. And being hit with a rat is somewhere in between.
While in prison, evidence came to light that he had committed another robbery, bursting into a jewellery store with a pistol and dashing out carrying watches with a total value of $50,000.
Well, at least that one was somewhat worth it, you know, like if you're going to rob something.
He really likes watches.
He really loves watches. I'm glad I don't wear one. I'd be in danger.
He got another 6 years at it for that.
Well, that's funny because, like, didn't he get 12 years for stealing one watch and then he gets 6 years for stealing 50 grand worth of watches? Where's the maths in that?
Yeah, I don't understand the
It's
Malaysian penal system. Yeah.
Really? You don't
Justice system.
understand the Malaysian penal
Well, I
system?
did write a thesis on it. But
I thought you wrote several.
That was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, you've forgotten all that information now,
that's
haven't
right.
you?
On the 29th of January 1991, Chuan Lian was tall and chubby-faced with a towering bush of woolly brown hair.
That's how I looked in 1991 too.
He entered Australia on a tourist visa and stayed. An illegal immigrant, broke and unemployed in Melbourne.
Oh, how's he going to afford watches now?
God, that was me last year.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Making his poverty worse were his relentless demands for money from his wife and 4 children at home in Malaysia.
Well, maybe don't have a lot of children if you're going to find their need for money to survive a problem. I don't know. I'm really coming down hard on this guy for breeding, but it just sounds ill thought out.
Oh, he's a complete dick.
Yes.
One day soon after his arrival, Lewin was passing time over a meal at the Jade Tree Chinese restaurant in South Yarra with his friend and fellow Malaysian, Australian citizen Philip Lim. He's 34. He was a cook at the restaurant.
Oh, so that's why this guy could get, to eat out that day.
Probably.
Right.
Chu Lewin mused with Lim that there had to be a way for them both to make some easy money.
Oh, easy money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere in Melbourne.
Philip Lim agreed, despite having a $20,000 gambling debt and had just lost a week's wages at the TAB.
Ooh.
Which is your off-track betting on
right.
horses. That's what a TAB.
Thing? Okay.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's where they go and they lose their week's pay on horses.
Yeah.
Oh, what about the doggies? You can bet on the greyhounds. In some places.
The GGs.
Is that what they're called?
That's what they call horse racing.
Oh, right. I
The
thought the
GGs.
GGs had something to do with greyhounds. I just couldn't figure out
No. They both dreamed of opening a massage parlour or a gambling club.
Well, why not both?
You could get a foot rub while you're on the roulette table.
Yeah, you could get a neck rub while you're just feeding the slots.
Chu Lewin said, "Let's rob a rich guy."
Hey, that's an idea.
Shortly afterwards, Philip Lim travelled back to Malaysia
Imagine the watch he'd have.
and seated on a bar stool at the Hot Legs pub in Kuala Lumpur,
Oh, I love that joint.
put his get-rich-quick plan to his former brother-in-law, Stanley Ng, 37. Stanley was into it. The pair returned to Australia.
Oh, God. You know the decisions you make at the Hot Legs Club generally don't stand up in the broad light of day.
Well, they've got their crew together now. There's 3 of them.
Well, yeah, let's rob a rich guy.
Yeah, so back in Melbourne, Chu, Philip and Stanley began to make plans, trawling for likely candidates. To make the selection process easier, Chu produced a Chinese magazine featuring wealthy Australian-based Asian businessmen. Any of these men will do, enthused Chu. But after some thought, they zeroed in on Dr.Victor Chang. Ugh.
Oh, God, so it's just a bunch of bumbling pricks that's going to take out this kind of, surgeon genius.
Yeah.
Oh, gross.
He had to explain to the others that Victor was a celebrated Sydney heart surgeon who had operated on famous people and was fabulously wealthy.
Oh, he's operated on famous people.
Yeah.
I bet his watch is amazing.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but robbing Dr. Chang, they decided, was a risk worth taking, so the trio drove to Sydney.
Wow, that's a bit of a drive.
On June 18th, they set up a home in a rented flat in Summerhill in Sydney's inner west, which is a poorer sort of suburb.
Yeah. I lived in Ashfield for a while. It's they're both not. They're not they're not ritzy. Well, at least they weren't when I was there.
And they began following the surgeon in Stanley's blue 1984 Toyota Corona.
Oh, Corona.
That's a sweet ride. They lurked outside his luxurious 3-storey hacienda overlooking Sandy Beach on the northern side of Sydney Harbour.
Oh, that's a rich area.
Yeah, and secretly observed the doctor coming and going in the areas around St Vincent's Hospital in Darlinghurst. They followed him, always a couple of car lengths behind, as he drove his $235,000 midnight blue Mercedes.
Oh, now that's a sweet ride.
I think I'd rather the Corona.
Really?
No.
No, lies.
These three fuckheads were feeling quite good about the money they would soon have. So, yeah, the knuckleheads bought a knife, adhesive tape, and some rubber gloves.
That's all you need.
Oh, no, they've got more stuff to get.
Oh, right.
They stole some license plates from a parked car and substituted the plates on Stanley's Corona. They acquired 4 guns, including a .32 caliber pistol for around $100, 3 silencers, and a number of boxes of bullets.
Right, okay. That's when it gets deadly.
Yeah, this is just like Ocean's 11, isn't it?
Actually, it's hotter and more exciting and worthwhile.
On June 28, the trio make their move. They drove to the Chang house, their mission to stage a home invasion, tie up the family, and demand $3 or $4 million. When Philip and Stanley asked Chu what they should give the Chang family to eat, should they become hungry before the ransom was delivered, Chu snapped, "Don't worry about them. Smash them. They don't matter."
Oh, I'm glad that didn't happen.
The robbers agreed that if Dr. Chang resisted their demands to hand over the money, they would threaten to hang his family one member at a time.
Fucking pricks. What, so they think he's just got biscuit tins full of cash in his house, do they?
Probably.
Well, they think he just has, I'll just go to the money room and get you that $4 million.
Money room.
Yeah, it's where I keep my money. It's like Scrooge McDuck's vault, what he has one of those,
and he swims in it and stuff.
Yeah, sounds likely, guys.
So they arrive in the street where Victor Chang lives, and they see a red car, unfamiliar to them, parked in the driveway. The family had visitors, so they said, no, not today.
Oh, thank God, because they sound like the kind of boneheads that would end up messing up the family as well. They don't sound like they're going to stay on point, do they?
Yeah, it sounds like a Coen Brothers film, doesn't it?
Actually, it does.
The following day, June 29, the men put another plan into operation. They would follow Dr. Chang from his home into the city, stage a minor collision by driving into the rear of his car, and when he got out to inspect the damage and exchange insurance details, they would rob him at gunpoint on the roadside.
So now he's got millions of dollars on his body.
Oh, it's in the trunk of his car, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, that's right. He carries that pirate treasure chest full of jewels in his car.
Well,
remember that bit?
Yeah.
He was renowned for that.
Again, their scheme was cancelled at the last minute, for as they drove closer to Dr. Chang's car, they saw that the doctor had a passenger who Stanley recognised as his son.
Oh, at least they've got the tiniest bit of scruples. That's something.
Frightened and shaken by their lack of success, the fuck knuckles argued.
No, you're a bigger fuck knuckle. No, you are.
It was decided that instead of robbing the surgeon, they would knock over a jewellery shop in Sydney's St James Arcade.
Good place to get yourself a new watch.
Sensing that his cohorts were totally disorganised and their scheme for robbery and ransom was doomed, Stanley announced that he'd had enough and he was out.
Oh, okay. Best call of your life,
That's it.
Stanley.
I'm out of here, guys. You guys are rubbish.
Screw you guys. I'm going home.
He would return to Melbourne. Chu and Philip accused him of having no guts.
Yes. No guts, but a bigger brain than you guys.
Yeah. Then thought up yet another scheme for robbing Dr. Chang. They would fake the accident and confront the surgeon beside his car, but instead of demanding $3 million, because he probably wouldn't have it on him, they would try to evoke his sympathy by telling him of their crappy circumstances and debts and convince him into giving them just $30,000.
Because he'd have that. So they're like, sorry, bumped into your car. We're incredibly fucking stupid. Can you please give us $30,000?
Oh, it gets even better.
Okay.
They would admit that they planned to murder him and his family in a bid to rob him of $3 million.
That's a way to get someone's sympathy.
But they had seen the error of their ways and would now settle for much less, and no one need get hurt.
Yeah, this is going to go well.
Yeah, though Chu would have the .32 caliber pistol concealed under his jacket just in case things turned nasty. There would be no need for violence, for surely this great humanitarian would take pity on them and happily hand over a lousy $30,000 to his poverty-stricken fellow Asians.
Oh my God, I don't know about you, but I would feel so sympathetic towards someone who was kind of threatening to kill my family. Don't you find that a very sympathetic thing to do?
No, they thought this was a great plan. And they decided to settle on July 4th to do this.
That's an auspicious date.
Yeah. What is that, Bastille Day or something?
No, fucking.
I'm just kidding.
You know what? It actually took me a second then to think of what it was, because the company that I work for have like a born on the 8th of July thing. They get really excited about the 8th of July.
Well, it's Cinco de Mayo here at the moment.
Oh my God, we were going to have a party for that this year, and then I forgot, and now it's Cinco de Mayo.
Oh well, margaritas after we finish this recording, I guess.
Absolutely.
All right, back to our story. At 7:30 a.m. on that fine and cold morning, Dr. Chang, alone this time, turned out of his driveway en route to St. Vincent's. His Mercedes was in the centre lane, stopped starting its way in heavy traffic when the blue Corona collided with the rear left side of the doctor's car. Bang. Both vehicles pulled over. Dr. Chang, Philip Lim and Chu Lian got out of their cars and stood on the footpath inspecting the damage to the doctor's Mercedes. I'm sure they were rubbing their chins going, It was 7:45 a.m. The doctor, far from being in his generous mood, was furious. How could you do this?
That was my sweet ride.
How could you do this to my sweet ride? He shouted at them.
He did not.
Well, he said something like that. So, for all his smiles of his public image, Victor Chang could be feisty and argumentative, and he did not suffer fools easily.
Oh, well, damn. It's all about to go down there.
It's kind of like a perfect storm, isn't it?
Because these guys are total tools.
Yeah. Chu called Dr. Chang by name, which must have...
But Victor...
Yeah, which must have alarmed him. And he went into his prepared spiel. He explained that they needed help. Could he please give them money because they were poor men deep in debt with numerous dependents? What Dr. Chang said next is unknown, but after around 10 minutes of heated discussion, he turned to walk away. Chu panicked, grabbed Victor Chang by the arm and tried to drag him back to the Corona. When his victim pulled away, Chu slammed his head into the windscreen of the vehicle, sending the doctor's glasses flying and opening his jacket to reveal the handgun tucked in his belt, in Chu's belt.
Right.
Chu Luan said, "Don't do any tricks or I will harm you."
Tricks? Card tricks?
Didn't like magicians.
Don't pull some scarves out of your sleeve.
Doesn't like magicians but likes watches. You got it? You following?
Yep.
Okay.
No rabbits.
Dr. Victor Chang, by now fearing for his life, pulled out his wallet, opened it and showed them that he was carrying only a small amount of cash in notes.
Of course he was, because he's not an idiot.
He offered them the money and suggested that he write them a check.
Sounds fair.
Suddenly, Victor Chang saw a chance to escape. A Mossman resident named David Goff came into view and the doctor called to him, "Call the police, they have guns." Chu really panicked. Yeah. He pulled out the revolver, put it to Dr. Chang's cheek and fired. The bullet passed through the doctor's cheek. Now, that wouldn't have killed him. It was a superficial wound. So they say.
He could have just taken off now and not so bad.
Dr. Chang dropped to his knees on the grass verge, cradling his bleeding face in his hands. Chu fired again, this time into the doctor's temple. The bullet entered his brain and he died instantly.
Way to kill someone who saved hundreds of lives and could have saved even more. You fucking dumbass.
I couldn't have said it better, Tara. Thank you.
Well, I am quite poetic.
Chu and Philip jumped back into the Corona and drove off. Chu, knowing that witnesses would have noted the car's registration number.
Oh, yeah, because it's like peak hour, right?
And told police. There's dozens of people around. They drove to a side street in nearby Crow's Nest. There, he and Philip removed the plates and replaced them with Stanley's original plates. Right. And dropped the stolen plates and the murder weapon in a bin in a car park. Philip Lim stayed in Crow's Nest while Chu Luan, caught a bus south across the harbour bridge to Chinatown. This is where he reached into his pocket for his wallet and found it missing. I wonder where he dropped it.
I really couldn't imagine.
Yeah, borrowing money from a friend, he caught an interstate bus to Melbourne and sought refuge in the outer suburb of Sunbury with his friend Jimmy Tan.
So he left his wallet at the scene of the crime?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
Right. Police, including members of the homicide and scientific squads, arrived at the murder scene, covering Dr. Chang's body with a white blanket and establishing a crime scene. Witnesses, pedestrians, drivers, and those who had witnessed the crime from passing buses and taxis came from everywhere offering information.
People.
Apparently there was over 30 that
Wow.
just saw everything.
Oh, wow. The perfect crime, guys. And you got away with so much in return.
They found Chu
He actually
Luan's...
lost money in this robbery.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. They found Chu Luan's black leather wallet lying on the grass just 1.5 metres from the doctor's body. That's about 5 feet. Inside was $30 and a small amount of Singaporean and Malaysian cash. So, yeah, he lost about 30...
He lost money in
He
this
lost
robbery.
$30.
Oh,
Australian
what?
money, yeah.
What the hell?
His identification papers were in there with photographs, a Malaysian driver's licence, a number of addresses in Melbourne were written out on a piece of paper. There was a Qantas ticket that he'd flown into Australia. Was there?
Wow,
And,
so he's done all their work for them.
and he had a losing Tatslato ticket in there as
Well,
well.
he wasn't going to have a winning one, was he?
Detective Dennis O'Toole noted at the time, "We thought the wallet was a setup. The murderers could have
Too easy.
stolen it or picked it up in the street and then thrown it in as a furphy."
Yeah, I guess you wouldn't want to believe they could be that stupid.
I think O'Toole was overestimating the intelligence and cunning of this crew.
Sounds like it.
Australia was saddened and went into shock. People brought armfuls of flowers to the place where Dr. Chang died. He was eulogised in Parliament and the media by politicians, celebrities, broadcasters, and all of those ordinary people whose lives had been saved by his genius. The medical fraternity was distraught. Valerie Lawson in the Sydney Morning Herald wrote, "Nurses wept, doctors cancelled their operations. After having used new techniques to perform a successful heart transplant operation on Fiona Coote in 1984, Chang's reputation had risen to that of a saviour. His death shocked the country, and on the 10th of July, more than 3,000 mourned him at St Mary's Cathedral. Some wore badges announcing their membership of the Australian Heart Transplant Club."
Oh, they have a club.
No, I don't want to be in that club.
No, me either.
The card on one bouquet read, "Dear Victor, you did everything to save our lives, but we could do nothing to prevent your life being taken."
Aw,
Very
that's
sad.
true.
Meanwhile, Task Force Oak, an elite 35-strong squad led by Detective Inspector Jim Council, was
Did they call it oak because they're looking for a bunch of wooden fucking heads?
Yeah.
Knuckleheads?
Knuckleheads, yeah, was established to arrest Dr. Chang's killers. The investigators placed under surveillance the people whose addresses they'd found in the dropped wallet. So they got him under surveillance and they're taking photos. And this one's my favourite. There was one photograph they took. Police say was at the very moment when Chu Lian tells Philip Lim he thinks he might have left his wallet at the murder scene.
Oh, I want to frame that one. Oh, wow.
No, I know the look of horror on his face. I bet his shoulders just slumped.
Oh, you know what that reminds me of? Remember that time that like some random psycho set your car on fire and then you called that guy and he gave you a quote of how much it would cost to get it cleaned out inside and then he arrived and saw what the job was?
Yeah, because I'd used fire extinguishers on the inside of my car, so it was just completely total, the inside of the car. It was just thick with this chemical residue. And the guy who arrived to clean his car, because he said, "Oh no, it won't be any more than $100."
Oh, poor guy.
When the guy looked at it, he knew that he was, and it took him 4 hours to do it. And his shoulders
sucked.
just slumped. Poor
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, he was FMLing hard.
Yeah, he really was. So anyway, after this photo was taken, Philip Lim returned to Malaysia.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Two Liam's associates were interviewed. Jimmy Tan told police that Luan had admitted to him that he had shot Dr. Chang. This is what he said. "I have killed a doctor. We extorted him $3 million. The doctor didn't want to pay, and he took out his wallet. There were a few $10. I didn't want that. I wanted millions of dollars. I then banged the doctor's head on the windscreen of the car. Then I fired. He loved his money more than he loved his life."
Right, yeah, that's what happened.
Chu Lian, now clearly needing to vent, told another acquaintance, Kay Chan, that his victim wasn't afraid of death. "I don't know why. He had so much money. He wasn't afraid of death. Pointed him with gun and doctor say, 'Don't afraid, I don't afraid.' Then the doctor struggled and there were people passing by. The time is right. I don't know why. Moved twice and fired 2 shots and he fell down."
Well, yeah, that was unnecessary, actually. What did he think that Chang was going to like go to a bank with him or something?
It was really poorly
Because
thought
you
out.
never go to a second location with psychos.
It's
because
such a
you're more
waste.
likely to get done. You got to fight it out in the first location if you can.
At 1 p.m. on July 13, 9 days after the slaying, Chu Luan, sporting a new short, spiky, dyed black hairdo, was arrested at Melbourne's Tullamarine Airport. as he attempted to board a Singapore Airlines flight. So they got him.
Yeah.
Really fast.
Well, he did all the work for them, really, didn't he?
He really did. He was freed after serving the minimum 18 years of his 24-year sentence.
He's out now.
He's out. And he was then deported back to Malaysia.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. It was kind of in the news a few years ago. He apologised a
Oh,
lot.
well, that's okay then.
There was interviews with him apologising and saying he feels
I'm
bad.
really sorry. Can you stop spitting on me, please?
You probably want to know what happened to Philip and Stanley.
Oh, they probably got given a puppy and a piece of cake and got sent on their
Well,
way.
they testified against him, and they got very short prison sentences.
Yeah.
And
they probably still have gambling debts.
they probably still have gambling debts. So that's the story of the three knuckleheads.
Wow, God. Killing someone who actually helped the world as opposed to, everyone else.
What do I call this story? The three knuckleheads, or do I call it the assassination of Victor Chang?
Well, you can do like that Jesse James movie. So the assassination of Victor Chang by the three knuckleheads, blah, 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 blah.
No, it sounds a bit long.
Yeah, it does sound very long. But, we'll figure that out later. Let's not workshop it. Although if anyone has any ideas, feel free to send them in.
The end.
The end. Wow. That's just... it's just a shame, really.
It's a real shame.
Yeah. And it was so pointless. They lost money during the robbery. I'm surprised he didn't leave his watch behind as well.
A lot of other people lost a lot more.
Oh, well, hell yeah. People definitely would have. Because, so he was in charge, Dr. Chang was in charge of the research into...
artificial hearts and things like that.
So were they able to continue on without him?
No.
Wow. So he might have actually thought of a whole lot of new things that could be saving people's lives right now.
Absolutely. Oh, look, I'm sure some other people have taken up his research, but, I think it would have slowed it down by many years.
No doubt. All right. Well, thanks, knuckleheads. Aussie as?
Aussie as.
All right. So these are just short little crime stories with a quintessentially Australian flavour. So I guess I should probably preface this by saying that we get some pretty big jellyfish here. Some double D-sized jellyfish wash up on our shores at times.
They're bigger in the ocean. I mean, the land ones are pretty big as they are, but...
Well, they wash onto the land. They don't live on the land, but you know what I mean. Or do you? Anyway, a good Samaritan in Australia may be feeling like a bit of a dick after mistaking a jellyfish for the breast implant of a homicide victim. The concerned man found the remains of a jellyfish on the beach and he placed it in a plastic bag and rushed it to the police station in Maroochydore, Queensland, where he told authorities he believed it was evidence of foul play. He handed over the bag containing the round, slimy orb to the police officers. Initially alarmed, the officers sprang into action and quickly got to work on the case. A statement on the police department's website explained, "Investigations revealed what police suspected. The item was indeed a jellyfish." Colin Sparks of Surf Life Saving Australia said the animal was probably a blubber jellyfish, a species commonly found in local waters with a sting that is irritating but not dangerous. The tentacles have been knocked off by a wave action or eaten by fish, Sparks said of the specimen given to the police, which is why it ended up looking a bit like a breast
So Colin
implant.
Sparks isn't the guy that found it.
No, the guy that found it
He just identified it as a jellyfish.
Yeah. Well, he's like, we get a lot of them here. Sometimes their tentacles get like eaten off or knocked off. Yeah, sometimes it kind of looks at low tide like there's several breast implants on shore. Most people don't freak out about it though because they realise that they're jellyfish.
Yeah. Tara, I've got a question for you.
Yes?
If say some old breast implants were put in a dumpster for some reason, I know they probably were meant to be burned, and an animal came along, like a dog or a cat or a raccoon or whatever, and pulled them out and dragged them down to the beach, should I pick them up and take them to the police? I'm asking for a friend.
Okay, yeah, well, okay. The raccoon would have to be imported from a different country because we don't have them here.
Well, look, this could happen.
The breast implants
This could happen
would be
anywhere.
in a medical waste bin of some sort.
I already explained that they accidentally put it in the dumpster.
Right, okay. And also, disturbing a crime scene, if it actually is one, not really a great idea, is it?
So I should just call the police.
Yes. Just call the police. Don't go. You know what? they could send like a forensic team out here to get the evidence, or I could help them out by putting it all in a plastic bag.
I think you're not getting what I'm saying. I'm saying that
I'm getting that you're an idiot. I'm getting that quite
there
loudly.
could be an innocent explanation for a breast implant being found in the street.
What? Because they accidentally got thrown in the wrong bin and a squirrel took it.
Yeah.
To the beach. Maybe it thought it was a volleyball.
I'm starting to regret bringing this up.
It's starting to. I've been regretting it for 90 seconds now.
Well, I'm going to change the subject, and that was another episode of Bloody Murder. That was actually 13. Lucky, hey.
Oh, wow. 13. Very lucky. So please don't forget to review us on iTunes if you so desire.
Do that rating and stuff and subscribing, because it does actually really help us.
It definitely
helps us grow.
It helps us grow in good and exciting ways. Also, feel free to join our Facebook group called Bloody Murder Podcasts. Every week we put up all the pictures of people from the cases.
The major players.
Yes. The major players. And, we get some interesting discussions going there too.
Yeah, you can tweet that shit too.
I could. Bloody Murder Pod. That's the Twitter. And we have an Instagram that I hardly ever use. And I can't... Oh, no, it is. It's bloody_murder_podcast, I think. Look at me smashing all the social media with maybe knowing the name of our Instagram.
And next time you're up on Netscape Navigator, have a look at our MySpace page. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.
We will indeed. And until then, just keep kicking against the pricks.
Goodbye and adios.
That it wasn't on, and they were using sonic pressure on my head since 1997.